Hello and welcome to Talk Truth. My name is Corey Huntsberger. I have my father, Alan Huntsberger, in the studio. We're going to start off with our foundational verse. The earth and everything in it, the world and its inhabitants belong to the Lord. For he laid its foundation on the seas and established it on the rivers. Psalm 24, 1 and 2. Important verse, Dad.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been penetrating me lately, as you know, and I won't go into all the detail, but I'm telling you that verse has really been penetrating me. If we actually believe what that verse says, that the earth and everything in it, the world and its inhabitants belong to the Lord, then we realize that our only salvation comes from the Lord. And the only way we get to salvation is by, first of all, we humbling ourselves and coming before God and asking him to forgive us of our sins.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the key to the whole scenario of what's going on in our country.
Yeah, well, we have a packed show, and you're going to learn why that verse is important because we've got Shawn Buckley on. Shawn, welcome back, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you, and we're going through a testimony that you did with the NCI, the National Citizens Inquiry. I'm going to go ahead and let you tee this one up.
Yeah, so this is Sarah Choujounian, who has 16 years nursing experience coming into what she's going to share with you. And she worked with kids, but she's really going to be testifying about what happened in a nursing home that she was working at. And then also what happened just as she started to voice some real concerns about what she had. And, you know, we're in a country where we've already bought vaccines for the monkeypox, and nobody's saying let's not lock down seniors or that again if we have another pandemic. And I think that we really need to pay attention to what she said, because she makes it human. We forget what it was like for people. Like, I know during this, you know, the COVID thing, when we were locked down, my mother-in-law was in a care home. And, you know, they locked down, you can't visit. So all we could do was go outside and wave through the window. And, I mean, the whole thing was awful. And you could see the deterioration in mental health and well-being. It was marked. And what's more cruel than, you know, end of life care, where basically you are the most vulnerable. Again, like, it's like you're a little child. You need help, you need assistance, you need your family, and then for the state to say you, or I guess officials in a care home to say that your family can't access you. I still can't get my head around it.
Yeah. Well, she's a very brave whistleblower, and this is her story. This is part one. Watch this.
Now, when COVID came along, you were working as a nurse in 2 places. Can you tell us what happened?
Yes, so I worked as a nurse in a nursing home. Mostly that was my main job, and I also worked in the community with kids. And so when the pandemic hit, it was actually very obvious to me that something was off. When you work in a nursing home, you know that the government doesn't care about these people. They get the cheapest food possible, and as much medications as possible is pushed onto them. So I thought nobody was going to believe what was happening. Unfortunately, everybody did, and I was the only one that seemed to be concerned at work. I was actually chief steward of the union, and so I called the union and told them, you know, what are we going to do? They're taking away our rights. They're taking away my residents' rights. And the union said, Sarah, don't you care about your residents? And so I understood that I might lose my job if I kept talking and pushing my beliefs. And so I stopped talking.
Can I just interrupt you for a second? So you are basically chief steward of the union for the nursing home that you worked at. And you're getting concerned that the residents are losing their rights and that actually union members are going to lose their rights. And when you phone the union, there isn't like a discussion about, you know, protecting rights. It's really it almost sounds like you were gaslit, like, don't you care about the residents? Can you give us a little more detail about that conversation?
Actually, at first, so I called my union rep, which is the person that is higher than me that I contact when there's a problem. And he actually didn't know the answer to my question and said, "Oh, that's interesting." He went along like something like, "Oh, that's interesting. I'm going to have to ask what to do." And so he asked and called, I think he called me back within the same day. And that's when he told me, like, why wouldn't I want to go with what they're saying? Don't I care about my residents?
What did you do after that?
I stayed quiet. I was a single mom of three. I couldn't go to my other job. Anyone that worked in a nursing home was not allowed to work in another place. And so I lost hours. I was already in a lot of debt as a single mom. And so I stayed quiet for a while and started seeing my residents deteriorate.
Can you describe what you saw?
Yeah, I had a resident that died within a week of a heart attack. People were saying it was a coincidence, but she was the type of resident that every time I came in the morning, I had to call her daughter and know exactly what time her daughter was going to come in, because her mom was going to ask me every 5 minutes when her daughter was coming. And if her daughter was 2 minutes late, she would go into an anxiety mode, and she had heart problems. So you can imagine what happened to her after 1 week of her daughter not being able to come in. Also, we have to remember a lot of these people have language barriers, dementia, and really had no idea or didn't understand what was going on or didn't care.
So you're saying the residents, so they're under lockdown where the family can no longer come in and see them. You're saying many of the residents didn't understand what was going on.
Yeah, exactly. And we have residents that, you have to think the nursing home is the last stop for these people. And the only thing that really brings them to life is their families, when their families come in. And some of our residents would never eat from us, and their families had to come in for every meal or every day. And so what happened to those people? They call it failure to thrive. They just gave up on life and died alone. And it was just so detrimental. Also, at some point, they started letting people come and do window visits. And that, I don't even know, maybe that was worse than them not coming, because that was even more confusing for some of them. And they were a few were getting agitated. And it was just so sad to see. And I heard management start talking about, for those people, that maybe they shouldn't get visits. No one was talking about like how messed up this was and how we should let people in. They hired volunteers to come feed people and help us from outside, and the families couldn't come in. It just made no sense.
So let me just follow up, because you used the term failure to thrive, and you basically described that, a situation where some of the residents literally depended on their families, where the families even had to come in to feed them. Now, I'm assuming that this is a very predictable consequence that should have been foreseen. So is this common in nursing homes, that there's a percentage of the population that is so dependent on their families that it would be predictable that they would fail to thrive without their families coming in?
Absolutely. I would say that at any time there's 2 or 3 on my floor. So on a unit of 32 people, there's at least 2 or 3.
Right. And when you have an entire system of nursing homes in a province where basically they're being shut out from the outside world, then you've got a certain percentage that basically are going to die from that decision. Would that be fair to say?
Well, I thought of that immediately. So I don't see why management or higher positions wouldn't have thought of that.
Okay. And so I'd interrupted. So you're seeing these bad outcomes for your patients, or I should say even, residents, because they can't see their families. So what happened after that?
Well, things got worse. They actually started testing us and testing the residents. And in my nursing home, 3 housekeeping staff tested positive with absolutely no symptoms. And so now not only is the facility and the units shut down, everybody in the facility, because housekeepers go around on every floor, had to now stay in their rooms for 14 days until everybody was tested negative again after 14 days. And so we can imagine how detrimental that was. If a resident did not want to listen to this, some of them are very demented too, and already agitated, knowing that their families are not coming in. And so, if residents weren't listening, they were said to have a behavior, the doctor would be called and they would be sedated. I also witnessed situations where.
Can I follow up? So basically, these residents are kept in their rooms 24 hours a day for 14 days because 3 staff members tested positive, but they didn't have any clinical symptoms.
Exactly.
But literally, the residents now are confined to their rooms. They are not allowed to leave their rooms for 14 days?
Yes.
So, and I just bring that up as a criminal lawyer, you can't have somebody in solitary confinement that isn't allowed out every 24 hours because we consider it would be cruel and unusual and unconstitutional in that context. But that's like on a 24-hour period. You're talking about 14 days.
Yes, and if someone tested positive, it would start again. I've heard of nursing homes that did that for like 3 months at a time. Not at my nursing home, so maybe I shouldn't talk about that. But at my nursing home, also, if anyone was trying to get out of their room and getting agitated because they wanted to go walk in the hallway with their walker, and if they did listen, they would just take their walker away. And that is so detrimental to their capacity to ambulate, but also they're alone in their room and they're at risk for falls. And we all know if a resident falls, they're at risk for hip fractures and it's all downhill from there, right?
And I'll just break in when you say, they lose their ability to ambulate, you mean walk. It's just you're using a medical term that some of the people viewing your testimony might not know. So what you're saying is people that rely on walkers to keep, walking, if they stop walking, they literally could lose their ability to walk in a short period of time.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry for interrupting. Please carry on.
Well, yeah, that was pretty much it. That's what I started deteriorating myself. I just couldn't watch this happen. It was also detrimental if a resident was about to pass away, then the family can come in and they had 15 minutes. So let's say if there was 3 people that wanted to visit before their parent or the resident passed away, they each had 5 minutes and they had to completely gown up. So the gown, the mask, the shield, the gloves, and it was just the resident sometimes did not recognize them or was already almost gone and on morphine. And so it was just like they didn't even know, or it wasn't, it was so inhumane. And so I decided to speak out.
Right, okay, so I'm just gonna go over what you just described. So the resident is dying, so surely there could be no concern about the resident catching COVID from one of the family members because the resident is just going to be taken to the morgue shortly. Am I right about that?
Yes.
And as far as the family goes, we're just talking even if there is a risk and, they're going to walk into the room once and they're going to walk out and leave the facility. Why would the facility care if they came and stayed all day in the room with their parent or other loved one?
That's a great question. I did not understand that neither. And as I said, they hired volunteers to come and feed the people that wouldn't eat, that to help us because we were understaffed too.
Okay, so you weren't given an explanation as to why families of dying people were only allowed a maximum of 15 minutes collectively. So if there's 3 of them, it's 5 minutes each to say goodbye.
No, anytime I asked any question, it was said that this was public health policy, and I just had to follow it.
Okay, so you started speaking out. Tell me about that and tell us about the consequences of that.
Well, at first I started posting actually in a private group online called Mothers Against Social Distancing. And was quite happy because I felt very isolated and people were paying attention, and I was, you know, getting a lot of feedback and people were interested. So I kept posting about like what was happening in the nursing home. Like there's 3 people with no symptoms and everyone's locked down, or we're all being tested with this PCR test that's not a diagnosis test. So I was saying things like that. And someone in the group took a screenshot, went to my profile, took a screenshot of where I was working because I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. So I wasn't hiding that I was a nurse or where I worked. And a headquarter was informed right away, and I was put under investigation where they wouldn't even tell me why.
Oh, so you're being put under investigation for social media posts, but you're not even told it's for social media posts so that, you know, you could decide whether or not you wanted to continue posting.
Right. I had an idea because I was having so many problems with them. They were telling us to actually do a lot of things that were so wrong and that we weren't supposed to do as nurses. Like, for example, we had to wear the same mask for 8 hours. Usually, if you touch your mask, you have to change it. Or they were telling us to usually, you know, when people are in isolation, when you wear a gown, you actually have to take it off in a certain way, like inside out, not ever touch the outside, put it in a red, like in a box that, you know, will be taken away without you like touching it. But now they were telling us to take off the gown and hang it up and put it back on. So there was a lot of things that I was complaining about and I was giving problems about. So I knew that, you know, I was kind of getting in trouble, but I didn't know why exactly.
Okay, so you're told you're on probation. What happens after that?
Well, people in the group, actually, I was quite upset that they were trying to shut me up when I was trying to help my residents. And someone actually approached me and asked me if I wanted to speak at a rally. I absolutely. So I spoke at a rally within maybe a week of the investigation starting or something like that. And so I spoke out October 31st, 2020, founded Nurses Against Lockdown to unite all nurses, bring the ethics back into healthcare and educate the public. And so, yeah, I thought that was the day where all the nurses were going to come on stage and we were going to put an end to this. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. And I was fired on the Monday. So that was Saturday and I was fired on the Monday. Not fired. They didn't say I was fired because I spoke out, but it was kind of obvious that they saw the video and that was it. The investigation was done.
So what were the reasons given for your termination?
I didn't follow the social media policy and public health policies. And so I forget the exact wording, but it's like misconduct.
Okay, so can you share with us, like, what types of things were you posting that all of a sudden something that's happening outside of work is a ground of firing?
Yeah, so things like how ridiculous is this? They shut down the entire like nursing home for 3 housekeepers that had no symptoms. And I guess the administrator really didn't like it because I mentioned her in it. Like, I was just like, because I asked her and she said no one has symptoms. I just thought it was so ridiculous. But I also posted about how the PCR testing was irrelevant and how wrong everything was. So I was posting against the narrative and the pandemic. Basically, it was 6 tweets. Well, not all tweets. They were like some on Facebook and some on Twitter. And yeah, there was 6 things, and that's what they fired me for. I was just talking about what I was seeing.
Did they give you a list?
Yes, I do have them.
So you get fired. What happens after that?
Well, I thought the union was going to help me and represent me, but they were definitely not with me. But I had already spoken out, and another nurse, which Kristen Nagel, saw me speaking out, and we teamed up. And from there, we teamed up with nurses in the States too. And that's when we went to Washington, D.C. On January 6, 2021, not knowing at all it was a political thing. And so we kind of got mixed up in that.
Right. So just because the commissioners and people watching your testimony might not understand when you're referring to January 6th, you're meaning the same January 6th, where in Washington there was the rally by people that were concerned that the election wasn't fair, and some people in the United States are saying that was an insurrection. So you happen to be basically on Capitol Hill, except you're at the Supreme Court part for a health rally at the very same time that the other event is happening literally a block away.
Yes.
Okay, so just so we're there, and so you're speaking at a health rally on January 6th, but you're not there to participate in the other rally.
Absolutely not. We were supposed to go speak in Florida, but Adele Bigtree and his assistant reached out to Erin, who is one of the nurses in the States. And so we were excited. We thought we would have more people that were going to hear us. And so we decided to go to Washington. That's how we ended up there at a Freedom and Health Summit.
Now, there's an old adage that no good deed goes unpunished. What happened to you for going to this January 6th health event and speaking?
So when we came back, I was fired from my second job. We were put under investigation. That was the first investigation by the college. I have like 5 or 6 now. And we were completely defamed internationally by the media, called domestic terrorists by some. Countless death threats, even had the RCMP come at our door. So. Okay,
so just so everyone understands what you're saying, so basically the mainstream media goes after you, and you are literally referred to as a domestic terrorist.
Yes.
So basically, you are completely attacked when you get back. And did this surprise you? How did you feel about all of a sudden being a celebrity?
Yes, actually, it did. It surprised me a lot. Like, we weren't expecting that at all. Thank God I wasn't alone, and Kristen was with me, because it was really scary, honestly. And I did the social media, so I really saw, all the threats that were coming in, and it felt very dangerous and very scary, especially being on the media. And I went outside and I didn't wear a mask, so some people were recognizing me. I felt in a lot of danger.
Well, Shawn, I don't know about you, but this just absolutely disgusts me, how they treat someone who really cares for the people that she is entrusted to look after, and how they treat her is unbelievable.
Well, isn't it interesting, because what she was saying publicly is, wait a second, well, you have vulnerable seniors in a care home. You can't deny them access to their families, that they're going to suffer, and you can't be locking them down. You have to be treating them better, and that gets you labeled as a domestic terrorist. That gets you disciplined by your nursing college. That gets you death threats. But make no mistake, there's method to the madness. All of this is for a purpose, and it is to intimidate other nurses that feel to their core that they should be speaking out, other healthcare professionals who know what's happening, or what was happening was wrong. It prevents them from speaking out, and it prevents them from speaking out to this day. We're still disciplining some doctors for standing up during COVID. And I haven't really been following the nurses situation, but I mean, here we have Sarah testifying last summer. She was still in the middle of disciplinary proceedings, and that is to make sure that the next time it happens, that all of the nurses stay quiet and all of the doctors stay quiet. And it's why, Constable Gruce, the police officer who was investigating COVID deaths in infants, that's why they're going after her. It's to intimidate everyone else.
Yeah.
And it kind of raises the question so is this good for Canada when health professionals feel that they cannot speak up because they're watching colleagues that did be punished?
Yeah. Alan?
Well, I know by another one of our guests that this whole COVID-19 was an exercise, and that's a military term. And that I don't think we know half of what that's all about, nor of what some people have planned to come. And I think we as Canadians have got to wake up and say, look, we got to get back to God, and we got to treat people the way God wants us to treat people, not the way some officials think we should treat people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to go with part 2 of our story tomorrow. Shawn, thank you so much for being here today, and we'll definitely see you tomorrow for part 2 of Sarah's story.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
Alan, I don't know if it's just me or when people tell me to keep your mouth shut, that makes me speak more. When someone says, don't do this, you know what I do? I double down. So it's just built in me, and we have to stop listening to human voices that cause fear, afraid, shame, all this stuff that she had to go under, and start listening to God's voice. That's where you get the confidence. That's where you get the bravery. That's where you stand up and do the right thing. And it doesn't matter what happens to you physically, job-wise, situation-wise. You do the right thing, and God will watch over his people that do that. Right, Dad?
Absolutely. I mean, we got to get to the place where we're not gonna do that. We're not gonna succumb to that kind of cruelty. Not at all. Not ever again.
Yeah.
Not on our watch. Not on anybody's watch. Not on our next generation's watch. It ain't gonna happen again. And so, if the officials are thinking that this is gonna happen again, be prepared. There's gonna be people that you're gonna either have to throw in jail or kill to stop, but we are not going to act like this again.
Amen. You want to help support our mission, keep this conversation and truth on the air. We are viewer supported. We don't take government funds or private funding. We are only supported by our viewers. You can go to our website, gotalktruth.com, click on the donate button. Many different ways you can give digitally that way. If you'd like to do it through the mail, you can. You can make your check payable to Heritage Christian Ministries Association and send it to 246 Stewart Grange, Southwest, Suite 3260, Calgary, Alberta, T3H3C8. And if you need prayer right now, you can call our toll-free number 1-800-915-0056 in Canada. All right, Dad, we're out of time. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Love you.